CloseBrace, for JavaScript developers, by JavaScript developers. Welcome back to 5-Minute React. We're getting down to where the rubber meets the road here and starting to put together the main functionality of our app. At this point, you should have a solid understanding of how actions broadcast data, reducers listen for it and update the store, and components render based on what's in their props. At least I hope you've got that understanding because things are about to speed up. The big secret about API building is that a lot of it is basic repetition of a few core concepts. Much of React development is like this as well. You just sometimes have to get fancy to perform particular data manipulations or give the user a better experience when interacting with your app. Okay, so all of that said, I'm going to throw more code at you and spend less time explaining stuff that I think you should already get. If this gets too overwhelming, intimidating, complex, etc., do not hesitate to leave comments. The goal of this series is to help people become confident React developers. If it's not doing that, then that's a problem. Cool? Good. On we go. We're going to start out by building a search form and creating an API endpoint for it to talk to. If we have time, we'll cover what to do with the response. If not, that'll go in the next tutorial. But first, let's fix a tiny mistake from the last tutorial. Open up config.js and change the two instances of discog to discogs. Then save the file, and let us never speak of this grievous error again. Next up, let's create an API endpoint for searching the discogs database. We're doing this in a slightly weird manner because the disconnect module doesn't play well with front-end code, so we're going to contact our API, which will then reach out to the discogs API. Don't worry, it's not too complicated. Head for /routes/API, and create a file called albums.js. In that file, insert the following imports and related functionality. And then add a padding line below that, and let's write out a very simple search route like this. That's it. We'll handle telling discogs what to search for in our action file. Speaking of which, save this file, and then create a new one in /source/actions called albums.js. This one's a little longer, but it's going to look very familiar. Some action creators, and then a method that uses fetch to post to the API. Here are the imports and action creators. And here's the search method. That one runs a little long, so I'll scroll through it. The only thing to note here is on line 19, the data packet we're sending to discogs, which is using type master and format album. This is important because if we didn't set the type to master, we'd get every single version of an album instead of the discogs master listing for it. As an example, I looked up the recent release Villains by Queens of the Stone Age, and there are 37 versions of that album alone, many of them just differing by what country they were released in. So if you search for an artist like, say, the Beatles without setting your type to master, you'd probably get thousands of results. Not very useful. Save this file, and now we need a reducer to listen to our actions. So in /source/reducers, create a new file, and name it, yet again, albums.js. Now add the following code. And of course we need to catch the failure action as well, so save that file, and open /source/reducers/error.js. Remove the CloseBrace from line 12, and just below it, add the following. We're good here. Save the file, and open /source/reducers/index.js. We need to add our new reducer to the store, so under line 1, add this code. And below line 7, go with this. That's all we need here, so save the file, and head for app.js. We need to wire up our new API route. That's going to happen on line 24, but while we're here, let's clean up and alphabetize this entire block. I suggest the following code. Now scroll down to line 67, and just below it, add this. While you're at it, let's move this authentication line up above users, just for alphabetical ordering purposes. Good, we're done here. Save the file, and let's create a new folder in /source/components called albums. Then in that folder, create a new file, and save it as albumspagecontainer.jsx. This is going to look very familiar at this point. Here it is. Again, I'll scroll so you can see it all. You'll note that we're storing any returned albums from the reducer here and clearing it when the component's going to unmount, which is just a nice little bit of state management. No need to keep all that data floating around if it's not in use. Save the file, and create a new file in /source/components/albums called, you guessed it, albumspage.jsx. This is probably the longest chunk of code I've ever given you guys, other than a here's what the whole file should look like wrap up. So here we go. Whole bunch of scrolling to do here. Most of this should be super familiar, but let's take a look at two things. First, our list albums helper on line 6. This takes an array of albums and then loops through it using array.map to spit back out JSX for each album in the array. This is wildly handy and we'll be using similar helpers all over the place. Notice that it's using not one, but two ES6 implicit returns. If you need a refresher on those, we talked about them in depth in tutorial 41. The other thing to note is lines 80 and 81. Here we're using some simple ternary operators to determine whether the albums list is populated and, if it is, add a bit of text and call our helper function. Alright, last thing. We need to add this new page to our template file for routing. So save this file and open up /source/components/template.jsx. Below line 3, add the following code. And then find line 29, and below it, add this. Save that file and you're done. However, if we check our console, you'll see that we're getting an error. The reason for this is because I missed a line. Head to /routes/api/albums.js and make sure we actually export our route at the bottom of the file, like this. Save that again. Check our terminal again. And this time we're looking good. That's a whole bunch of stuff. The API endpoint, actions and reducers, and a page to control them all. Let's check in a browser and make sure this thing works. Restart your server for safety, and when it's ready, refresh your site. Then head for localhost port 3000/albums. You should see your search box awaiting input. Type in the name of a band. I'll go with one I'm enjoying right now. Unless you're searching for a J-pop/ska fusion band from Norway, Discogs will probably have an album of theirs in the DB. Actually, they still might. Go ahead and search. You should see a really ugly list of albums pop up. Nice! Next step, making that list a bit prettier and a lot more functional. See you then.